I still remember the exact second it happened, because my body reacted before my conscience could, before guilt, before fear, before the part of me that knew I was about to ruin something sacred. It wasn't dramatic, no music, no grand setup, just a quiet kitchen, the low hum of the refrigerator, and the smell of leftover wine hanging in the air like a mistake that hadn't been cleaned up yet. My best friend had stepped outside to take a phone call, laughing, pacing the driveway like she always did when she talked to her sister. She trusted us, completely. And I betrayed that trust in less than 5 seconds. Ethan was standing too close. Close enough that I could feel his warmth. Close enough that I noticed the way his jaw tightened when he smiled, the way his voice dropped when he spoke softly. I noticed these things before, but I'd always buried them under the label of harmless admiration. That night, there was nowhere to hide them. He said my name, low, almost hesitant. I looked up, and I didn't step back. The kiss wasn't aggressive. It wasn't rushed. That's what haunts me most. It felt natural, like something that had been waiting for permission. For half a second, my brain screamed, "This is your best friend's husband." For another half second, I thought, "This is wrong." And then there was nothing but the sensation of his lips and the terrifying realization that I didn't want it to stop. I pulled away first. I had to. My heart was pounding so loudly I was sure she could hear it from outside. Ethan didn't chase me. He didn't apologize either. He just looked at me with an expression I still can't fully describe. Not regret, not triumph, but something heavier, something knowing. I muttered something stupid about needing water and practically fled to the bathroom, locking the door like I could lock the moment behind me too. I stared at myself in the mirror, trying to recognize the woman staring back. She looked the same, but she wasn't. If you find this story good, please like and subscribe our channel. It's free for you, but helps us a lot to keep sharing real stories like this. That night, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, the memory replayed itself, sharper, warmer, more vivid. I told myself it was shock, adrenaline, a one-time lapse. I promised myself I would forget it, bury it, pretend it never happened. But forgetting isn't something you choose, especially when the person you're trying to forget is suddenly everywhere. Ethan didn't avoid me. If anything, he became more careful, which somehow made it worse. He kept his distance physically, but his eyes lingered. His tone softened when he spoke to me. And every small interaction felt loaded with the weight of what we'd done. My best friend Lily noticed nothing. That's another part that still twists my stomach. She laughed. She teased us for being weirdly quiet. She trusted me with her secrets, her worries, her marriage, all while I nodded along, smiling, pretending my hands hadn't betrayed her days earlier. I tried to reset. I skipped group hangouts. I answered texts late. I told myself space would fix it. But the problem wasn't proximity. The problem was what had been unlocked in my mind. Because I couldn't stop thinking about the kiss. Not just the act, the meaning, the implication. The fact that it had felt mutual. The fact that I hadn't imagined the tension all those months. The fact that something real had been there, long before I ever acknowledged it. I started noticing things retroactively. Moments I dismissed. The way Ethan always remembered tiny details about me. The way he defended me in conversations. The way his humor matched mine too easily. I wondered if he'd felt it too, all along. Or worse, if he still did. A week later, we were all together again. Lily invited me over like nothing had changed. I considered cancelling. I should have cancelled. But curiosity has a dangerous way of overpowering common sense. The evening was painfully normal. Dinner, wine, laughter. Lily rested her head on Ethan's shoulder, and I had to physically clench my jaw to keep my face neutral. I hated myself for noticing how naturally they fit together. I hated myself more for noticing how his eyes still found mine across the table. At one point, Lily went upstairs to grab something. I stayed seated. Ethan stood up to clear the plates. We moved around each other in silence, choreography born of discomfort. Then, quietly, without looking at me, he said, "We shouldn't have done that." Relief flooded me, quickly followed by disappointment I wasn't proud of. "I know," I said, and I meant it, mostly. He nodded. "It can't happen again." I agreed, immediately, too quickly. And yet, when he brushed past me, his hand grazed my arm. It could have been an accident. It should have been an accident. But my skin reacted like it remembered. That night, I went home and cried. Not because I was heartbroken, but because I was scared of myself. Because I realized something that terrified me more than guilt. I didn't regret the kiss. I regretted wanting it again. Over the next few days, my thoughts became a battlefield. Every rational part of me screamed to protect my friendship, to respect boundaries, to act like an adult. But another part, quieter, more insistent, replayed the moment over and over, wondering what if. I told myself Ethan was committed, that he had drawn the line, that nothing more would happen. Then he texted me. Nothing explicit, nothing inappropriate, just a simple message about a book I'd once recommended. Completely innocent on the surface, but the subtext was loud. "I'm thinking about you." I stared at the screen longer than I should have. Then I replied. And that was the moment I crossed the line for the second time. Not with my body, but with my intention. Because once the door is opened, even slightly, it doesn't close the same way again. I didn't know it yet, but the kiss wasn't the beginning of the end. It was the beginning of something far more dangerous. The text shouldn't have mattered. That's what I told myself. It was just words on a screen, harmless, neutral, something anyone could send without meaning anything by it. But I felt my pulse quicken the moment his name lit up my phone. My body reacted before my mind could catch up, just like it had in the kitchen that night. I typed a response, deleted it, typed again. When I finally sent something back, it was careful, polite, safe. At least, that's what it looked like on the surface. Underneath, I knew what I was doing. I was opening the door just enough to see if he'd push it wider. He did, not immediately. Ethan was subtle, which somehow made everything worse. He never mentioned the kiss, never crossed into anything that could be screenshot and condemned. Instead, he asked questions, remembered details, brought up shared jokes from months ago. He made me feel seen in a way that was quiet but persistent, like a low hum I couldn't tune out. Days turned into weeks, and our conversation settled into a rhythm that felt dangerously comfortable. I told myself it was innocent. Friends talk. Married people have friends. Best friends' husbands are allowed to be friendly. But there was an undercurrent I couldn't deny, something that pulsed beneath every exchange. The hardest part was Lily. She called me almost every day, told me about her job, her plans, her marriage. She complained about small things Ethan did, laughed about the big ones, trusted me the way she always had. Sometimes she'd say, "You're lucky to have me," joking, and I'd laugh along while something sour twisted in my chest. I wanted to confess. There were moments when the guilt rose so sharply, I felt sick. I'd imagine sitting across from her, watching her face fall as I told her what I'd done. I pictured the silence that would follow, the permanent fracture. And every time, fear won. Fear of losing her, fear of being exposed, fear of what Ethan might say if the truth came out, and fear of something else I didn't want to admit yet. Because even when I hated myself for it, part of me was waiting for his messages. The second kiss didn't happen right away. That's important. It wasn't impulsive or fueled by alcohol or circumstance. It grew slowly, fed by stolen glances and private conversations, by the way he'd look at me when Lily wasn't watching, like he was measuring something he hadn't decided to take yet. The night it happened again, it was quieter than the first. No dramatic build-up, no sudden spark, just inevitability. Lily had invited me over to help her plan a weekend trip. She went upstairs to grab her laptop, leaving us alone in the living room. The air felt thick, like it knew something we were pretending not to. We didn't speak at first. He stood near the window, hands in his pockets. I sat on the couch, pretending to scroll through my phone. I could feel him there, the way you feel someone watching without looking. "This has to stop," he said finally. I looked up at him, and for a second I thought he was going to walk away. I almost hoped he would. "I know," I said. But neither of us moved. He took a step closer, not enough to touch, just enough to change the space between us. "I don't want to hurt her," he said, voice low. That should have been my cue to end it, to stand up, to leave, to do the right thing. Instead, I stood too. Close enough now that I could smell his cologne, familiar and unsettling. "I don't either," I replied. And then we were kissing again. It was slower this time, more deliberate. There was no pretending it was a mistake. His hands stayed where they were supposed to, but the restraint only sharpened the tension. When we pulled apart, my hands were shaking. We didn't say anything else. Lily came back downstairs, smiling, oblivious, and we acted like nothing had happened. That was the moment I realized how dangerous this had become, not because of the kiss itself, but because of how easily I could lie now. After that, the line we'd crossed became easier to step over. Not physically at first, but emotionally. We shared looks that lasted too long, conversations that felt private, even in public. We started finding excuses to be in the same room when Lily stepped away. I hated the version of myself that emerged in those moments. Calculating, selfish, alive in a way that scared me. I told myself I was still in control, that I could stop anytime, that this was temporary, a phase fueled by proximity and tension that would burn out on its own. Then Lily told me she was worried. She said Ethan had been distant lately, that he seemed distracted. She asked me if I thought he was stressed or unhappy or hiding something. I listened, nodding, offering comfort like the loyal friend I was supposed to be, while my heart hammered against my ribs. That night, I didn't sleep at all. I stared at the ceiling, replaying everything. The kisses, the texts, the lies. I told myself I would end it. I even drafted a message in my head, firm and final. "This can't happen anymore. We have to stop." But when morning came, I didn't send it. Instead, my phone buzzed first. From him. Just 2 words. "Can we talk?" I knew in that moment that whatever conversation was coming would change everything. That the careful balance we'd been maintaining was about to tip, one way or another. And I also knew something else, something that terrified me more than guilt or exposure. I wasn't sure I wanted it to stop. We met at a cafe halfway between my place and theirs, the kind of neutral territory people choose when they're pretending something is still simple. I arrived early and picked a table near the window, my back straight, my hands wrapped tightly around a cup of coffee I wasn't drinking. I told myself I was there to end it, that I would say the words clearly and leave with my dignity intact. Then Ethan walked in. He looked tired, not disheveled, not guilty, just worn in a way that made something in my chest soften against my will. He smiled when he saw me, hesitant but relieved, like he'd been holding his breath all morning. We didn't hug. That felt important. For a few seconds, we talked about nothing. Work, traffic, the weather. It was almost funny how carefully we avoided the thing sitting between us, like a third presence at the table. Finally, he leaned back and exhaled. "This isn't sustainable," he said quietly. I nodded. "No, it's not." I waited for him to say more, to take responsibility, to draw the line firmly. Instead, he looked at me in a way that felt dangerously open. "I think about you more than I should," he admitted, "and I hate myself for that." The words landed heavier than any confession I could have imagined, because they mirrored exactly what I'd been too afraid to say out loud. "I don't want to be the reason your marriage breaks," I said. It was the truth, or at least, part of it. He shook his head. "You're not the reason. You're a symptom." That should have scared me. It did scare me, but it also pulled me in. He told me things then, not excuses, not complaints, but quiet truths. About feeling unseen, about how Lily and him had drifted into routines so subtle they didn't notice until something disrupted them. About how he hadn't gone looking for anything, but how impossible it was to ignore what had surfaced between us. I listened, my heart pounding, because every word made it harder to stand on moral ground. This wasn't a villain story. It was a human one, and that made everything messier. "We have to stop," I said again, softer this time. "I know," he replied, "but I don't know how to just erase what's there." Neither did I. We paid separately, walked out separately. That felt like progress, for exactly 3 days. On the 4th, Lily invited me over again. I almost declined. I should have declined, but avoidance was starting to raise questions, and the last thing I wanted was her curiosity turning sharp. So I went. The house felt the same, which somehow made everything worse. Familiar couch, familiar kitchen, familiar rhythm of a life I was intruding on without permission. Ethan was there when I arrived. He looked at me briefly, carefully, like someone handling something fragile in public. Lily didn't notice. She never did. Dinner was loud, easy. Lily talked about the trip we were planning. She teased Ethan about forgetting to pack chargers. At one point, she laughed so hard she leaned into me, resting her head on my shoulder, and the guilt hit me so fast, it almost took my breath away. I excused myself to the bathroom, just to breathe. When I came back, Lily was on the phone upstairs, again. The universe had an awful sense of timing. Ethan was at the counter, rinsing dishes. I stood near the doorway, telling myself not to move closer. I meant what I said, he murmured without turning around. At the cafe. So did I replied. He turned then, our eyes met, and something in the air shifted. Not urgency, not heat, but inevitability. I can't keep pretending you don't exist, he said, and I can't pretend this isn't affecting me. My heart was beating too fast. Then we should create distance. Yes, he agreed. He took a step toward me anyway. That's how it kept happening, words going one way, bodies another. This time, there was no kiss. That almost made it worse. He reached out and stopped himself inches away, his hand hovering near my arm. The restraint felt intimate, in a way that made my chest ache. Tell me to stop, he said quietly. I should have, I knew that. Every rational part of me screamed that this was the last chance to do the right thing. Instead, I whispered, this can't keep happening. He nodded, I know. Neither of us moved. Lily came back downstairs before anything crossed another physical line, but something inside me had already shifted. I realized then that we were no longer reacting to moments. We were creating them. After that night, the tension became unbearable. It followed me home, into my sleep, into my thoughts during the day. I found myself replaying conversations, reading between lines that weren't even there, wondering what he was thinking, what he was feeling. And then something happened that changed everything. Lily asked me, point blank, if I thought Ethan was happy. The question came out of nowhere. We were walking through a store, laughing about something trivial, and then she stopped and looked at me, serious in a way I hadn't seen before. He feels far away lately, she said. You know him well, better than most people. Do you think I'm missing something? The world tilted. I could have lied outright. I could have deflected. Instead, I froze, just long enough for her to notice. Her expression didn't harden, it softened. That was worse. You'd tell me if something was wrong, she said gently. That night, I went home and cried harder than I had in years. Not from guilt alone, but from the realization that I was standing at the edge of something irreversible. That this wasn't about desire anymore. It was about choice. Ethan texted me later. I think she's starting to feel it, he wrote. My hands shook as I typed back. We have to stop, completely. There was a long pause before he replied, I don't know if I can. That was the moment I understood. The danger wasn't the kiss. It was the emotional space we'd carved out, the one that now existed at the center of 3 lives. And it was getting harder to pretend it wasn't there. After Lily asked that question, nothing felt safe anymore. Every interaction carried the risk of exposure. Every word felt like it could tip something over. I started measuring my expressions, my tone, the speed of my replies, as if I were walking through a house rigged with alarms only I could hear. I told myself I would pull back, that this was the moment to choose loyalty over longing. I stopped initiating conversations with Ethan. When he texted, I responded hours later, short and neutral. I convinced myself that distance would dull the intensity, that time would smooth the sharp edges we'd created. It didn't. If anything, the absence made everything louder. I felt him in the quiet moments, in the gaps between thoughts. I caught myself scanning rooms for him, even when I knew he wouldn't be there. It was humiliating, realizing how deeply I let something root itself inside me, without permission. The next time we were all together, the tension was unbearable. Lily had invited a few friends over, turning the house into a buffer of noise and distraction. It should have helped. Instead, it made the moments we accidentally shared feel more exposed. Ethan barely looked at me. That hurt more than it should have. It also felt deliberate, like a line he was forcing himself not to cross. I tried to mirror his distance, but my body betrayed me in small ways. The way I stiffened when he passed too close. The way my breath caught when he laughed. At one point, Lily went to the kitchen and asked Ethan to help her with something. They stood together, shoulders touching, moving with the easy intimacy of a married couple. I watched them from across the room and felt something crack inside my chest. This was the reality. This was the life I was orbiting but not part of. Later that night, when most of the guests had left, Lily pulled me aside. Her voice was light, but her eyes were searching. You've been quiet lately, she said. Are you okay? I nodded too quickly. Just tired. She studied me for a moment longer than usual. You know you can tell me anything, right? The words felt like a test I was failing in real time. I hugged her, held on a second longer than necessary, and promised myself, again, that I would fix this. That night, Ethan didn't text. Neither did I. The silence stretched, heavy and unnatural. I stared at my phone more times than I'd admit, waiting for a message that I knew I shouldn't want. When it finally came, 2 days later, it wasn't casual. Can we talk? Alone? I hesitated. Every instinct warned me not to meet him, but avoidance had already cost too much. I needed clarity, even if it hurt. We met at a park just before sunset, the kind of public place that feels private if you choose the right bench. He looked tense, jaw set, hands clasped together like he was holding something back. I can't keep doing this halfway, he said without preamble. Ignoring you is making it worse. I swallowed. Then we stop, fully. I've been trying, he replied, but you're not just a moment. You're in my head. The honesty scared me, not because it was dramatic, but because it was quiet and controlled, the kind that doesn't disappear on its own. This isn't fair to her, I said, or to us. I know, he said, that's the problem. We sat there, the air thick with everything we weren't saying. I wanted him to tell me he'd choose his marriage, that this was over, that I could finally let go without wondering. Part of me wanted the opposite, and I hated that part the most. I think she suspects something, he added quietly. My heart dropped. What? She hasn't said anything directly, he explained, but she's watching, asking questions. She feels the distance. Guilt hit me in waves. This wasn't abstract anymore. This was real damage spreading outward. We have to end this, I said, firmer now, before it turns into something we can't undo. He looked at me for a long moment, then nodded. Okay. The agreement felt fragile, like glass. We stood up without touching. No hug, no lingering. Just 2 people walking away from something that had never fully existed, yet somehow felt like a loss. For a while it worked. We didn't see each other. We didn't text. I focused on work, on friends, on rebuilding some version of normal. I told myself this was what healing felt like, uncomfortable, quiet, slightly hollow. Then Lily called me late one night. Her voice sounded off, tight, controlled. Can you come over? She asked. I need to talk. The drive felt endless. My mind raced through possibilities, each one worse than the last. When I arrived, she was sitting on the couch, hands folded in her lap. Ethan wasn't there. He went out for a walk, she said when I asked. She took a breath. I'm going to ask you something, and I need you to be honest. My chest tightened. Is there something going on with Ethan that I don't know about? The room felt smaller. I chose my words carefully, painfully aware that one wrong sentence could destroy everything. I think he's been distracted, I said. Stressed. She nodded slowly. That's what I thought too, but there's more. My heart hammered. What do you mean? She looked at me, eyes glossy but steady. I found messages, not explicit, not proof, just closeness, emotional. My throat went dry. With you? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Time slowed. This was it. The moment I'd been dreading, rehearsing, avoiding. I never meant to hurt you, I said, and the truth cracked through my voice before I could stop it. She didn't yell. She didn't cry. She just closed her eyes, like someone absorbing a blow they'd seen coming. So it's real, she said. I swear, it never went beyond. I stopped myself. The technicalities felt cruel. It shouldn't have happened at all. She nodded, tears finally slipping free. I trusted you. That was the worst part, worse than anger, worse than accusation. Ethan came home later that night to a house already fractured. I wasn't there to see what was said, what was decided, what lines were drawn. Lily texted me once, hours later. I need space, from both of you. I understood. I deserved it. In the days that followed, the silence was different, final. No texts from Ethan, no calls from Lily, just the echo of choices made too late. I told myself it was over, that whatever had lived in that space between us had finally collapsed under its own weight. But closure is rarely clean, because even as everything around me fell quiet, one truth remained, stubborn and unresolved. I still thought about the kiss, and I didn't yet know what that meant for the person I was becoming. The silence after Lily asked for space was heavier than anything that came before it. No more adrenaline, no more tension, just the echo of what I had done, bouncing around inside my head with nowhere to land. I kept checking my phone out of habit, even though I knew there would be nothing there. No messages from her, no messages from him. Just the quiet confirmation that some lines, once crossed, don't uncross themselves. The first week was denial, dressed up as distraction. I filled my days with work, errands, noise. I told myself I was fine, that things would settle, that time would do what it always does. But time didn't soften anything, it sharpened it. Every quiet moment forced me to sit with the truth. I had been trusted completely, and I had failed that trust. I replayed the kiss differently now, without romance, without tension, stripped of mystery. When I looked at it honestly, it wasn't magical. It was selfish. It wasn't love, it was escape. A brief moment where I chose feeling wanted over doing the right thing. That realization hurt more than guilt. 2 weeks passed before Lily reached out. The message was short, careful. I'm not ready to see you, but I need answers. We met in a public place again, the same cafe where Ethan and I had once tried to be rational. This time, there was no pretending. Lily looked exhausted, like someone who had cried quietly for days, and then decided to stop because it wasn't helping anymore. She didn't raise her voice, she didn't accuse. She asked questions calmly, methodically, the way people do when they're bracing themselves for pain they already suspect is coming. How long? How did it start? Did you love him? I answered everything honestly, not to punish myself, but because lying again would have been another betrayal. I told her about the kiss, about the emotional closeness, about how it never became physical beyond that. I watched her flinch anyway. When I finished, she sat back and nodded slowly. I think what hurts the most, she said, is that you knew me. You knew what this would do. She was right. She told me she and Ethan were starting counselling, that she hadn't decided what their marriage would look like yet, that some days she felt strong, and other days she felt foolish for missing what they used to have. I don't know if I'll ever trust you again, she said quietly. And I don't say that to hurt you. I say it because it's the truth. I accepted it. I had no defense left. I didn't see Ethan during that time. I didn't want to. Part of me feared that seeing him would reopen something I was trying desperately to let close. Another part of me wanted answers I knew wouldn't help. When he finally reached out, it was weeks later. One message. Direct. I'm sorry. I didn't reply right away. I stared at the words, weighing them. An apology doesn't erase damage. It doesn't restore trust. Sometimes it's just acknowledgement. When I did respond, it was brief. Honest. I am too, but this can't continue. Not in any form. He didn't argue. He didn't push. That told me everything I needed to know. Whatever existed between us had thrived in secrecy and tension. Without those, it had nowhere to live. Months passed. Lily and I never went back to what we were. We stayed civil, distant, polite in the way people are when they're protecting old wounds from reopening. I missed her more than I missed him. That was another truth I had to face. There were days I wondered if the kiss had been worth it. If the intensity, the obsession, the endless replaying in my mind justified the cost. The answer changed depending on the day. But here's the part I don't say lightly. I never stopped thinking about it. Not because it was romantic, but because it became a marker. A dividing line between who I thought I was and who I learned I could be under the right circumstances. That realization forced me to confront parts of myself I'd ignored for years. My need for validation, my fear of being invisible, my willingness to rationalize harm when it felt good. The kiss wasn't the worst thing I did. The worst thing was believing I was different from people who make these mistakes. I learned that boundaries don't fail all at once. They erode quietly, through small permissions, through silence, through moments you convince yourself don't count. If I could go back, I wouldn't undo the kiss to save myself from guilt. I would undo it to save someone I loved from pain she never deserved. That's the part that stays with me. Not the longing, not the tension, not the what ifs, the cost. Because some memories don't fade. They don't haunt you because you want them to. They stay because they taught you something you can't unlearn. And that's why I still think about it. Not with desire, with clarity. If you find this story good, please like and subscribe our channel. It's free for you, but helps us a lot to keep sharing real stories like this.